Les collègues, bienvenue à la réunion numéro...
Colleagues, welcome to meeting number 36 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083F and the motion adopted April 21st, 2026, we are gathered to study the draft regulations on the use of French in federally regulated private businesses. I would now like to welcome our witnesses. From Droit Collectif Québec, we have Étienne Alexis Boucher, Chief Executive Officer by video conference, welcome. And François Côté, General Counsel by video conference, welcome. And then from the Fédération Acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse, we have Jules Chiasson, Chief Executive Officer, here in person, welcome. And Denise Comeau Deshôtels, President by video conference, who I do not see on the screen.
Denise Comeau.
Denise Comeau.
En ce moment, de la Fédération acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse.
From the Fédération Acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse, we have solely Jules Chiasson, who is here in person. Thank you. Each organization will have 5 minutes for opening remarks. We will then proceed to questions and answers from committee members. We will start with Mr. Boucher. You have the floor, 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Mr. Baker, Mr. Chair, greetings to our chair and vice chairs and all committee members, and especially the member for Bromisqua, who comes from the eastern townships where we are located. And my mother is actually from that region as well. You have no doubt heard of Droit Collectif Québec. We work to protect the collective rights of Quebecers, including their language rights. We have been around since 2019, and over time, we have been working to protect the language rights of Quebecers. We work with all sorts of different organizations, from the Francophonie Canadienne, the FCFA, other organizations, and thank you for agreeing to hear us on these draft regulations. That's it? You're done? I'll start from here. Thank you, everyone. It is an honor to be here today. We are here to talk about the draft regulations on the use of French in federally regulated private businesses and our observations. Mr. Côté, sorry to interrupt you there. Sorry to interrupt you. Could I ask you to speak a little bit slower? We have interpreters here working on translating everything that you are saying, and sometimes if people go too fast, it can be difficult for them to do their translations. All right? I would not want to give any headaches to our esteemed interpreters, so I will slow down. Droit Collectif Québec is strongly against these regulations, which trample on areas of Quebec jurisdiction. We have interpretation will briefly suspend due to a degradation of sound quality.
Où ce projet vient effectivement, quoique de manière très sectorielle et fort limitée géographiquement et démographiquement, remplir un certain vide juridique. Nous estimons par contre que le projet de règlement au Québec fait un inutile double emploi et concurrence avec la Charte de la langue française par-dessus le marché en proposant un régime d'encadrement et de protection linguistique singulièrement moins efficace que celle-ci à plusieurs endroits clés. Pour le dire franchement, nous voyons dans le projet de règlement une entreprise calculée d'empiètement fédéral sur l'autonomie politique et juridique du Québec en matière linguistique, en cherchant à neutraliser l'effectivité juridique de la Charte de la langue française, qui s'applique pourtant...
Monsieur Côté, je dois vous interrompre.
Mr. Côté, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're having a technical issue. No? I'm going to suspend for just a second. I'll stop the clock. I'll get back to you.
Monsieur Côté, désolé. On a
Mr. Cote, apologies. The interpreters are just having trouble hearing you properly. The sound quality is not up to scratch. Someone on the team here will call you to try and solve the problem. What I would suggest, colleagues, is that we move on to Mr. Chesson and then come back to Mr. Cote in the hopes that the situation will have improved. Does that work for everyone?
J'apprécie ça, monsieur.
Much appreciated, Mr. Cote. Mr. Chesson, you have the floor. 5 minutes. Honorable Chair.
Monsieur le Président et chers membres.
Honorable Chair, members of the Standing Committee on Official Languages, it is a true pleasure and a privilege to speak to you today on behalf of the Fédération acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse as part of your study on the draft regulations on the use of French in federally regulated private businesses. Our organization, which has been around since 1968, has 29 member organizations, 12 regional organizations, 15 provincial organizations, and 2 institutional organizations. The Fédération acadienne supports the government's draft regulations on the use of French in federally regulated private businesses. Such regulations aimed at ensuring that federally regulated private businesses offer services in French represent tangible support to the existing Official Languages Act and other measures aimed at supporting official language minority communities. At the same time, a number of questions remain surrounding how these regulations will be enforced. First, what federally regulated private businesses will be subject to these regulations? Will the regulations be applied to the same way for Anglophone and Francophone minority communities? It is important to recognize that Francophone communities in a minority setting are at a heightened risk of issues preserving their and developing their language and culture. Major national corporations could easily offer French language services to the public and a French language work environment to their employees. This would be reasonable and would not represent an excessive cost for them. The federal government could play a supportive role by offering financial support or other types of support to such businesses to ensure that services and workspaces in French are available. There is no need to ensure that every single branch of a company operating in a designated area can systematically offer French language services and a French language workspace. It might be more realistic for businesses to designate a small number of branches able to offer such services in French in a given area. The local Francophone community would be able to quickly identify these points of service and thereby fully benefit from French language services. The same would be true for the company's Francophone employees. Regions with a strong Francophone presence, as identified under the criteria in the draft regulations on the use of French in federally regulated private businesses, are not sufficient if the government is to have a real positive impact on Nova Scotia's Francophone and Acadian community. The recognition of Digby, Yarmouth, and Richmond counties is a step in the right direction, but the government should more specifically focus on the municipalities of Clare, Argyll, and the Francophone community of Île-Madame in Richmond County. Doing so would better adapt the regulations to the realities of Francophones and Acadians in these regions. The region of Cheticamp should also be taken into consideration in the draft regulations. The Acadian community in this region has just received a protected provincial riding. This recognition comes from significant grassroots efforts that led all the way up to the Nova Scotia Supreme Court, aimed at ensuring sufficient political representation. The city of Halifax should also be included amongst the regions where the regulations will be applied. Today, Halifax is an important hub of Francophone culture in Nova Scotia. Its French-speaking population is estimated 15 to 20,000. Halifax has 8 Acadian schools run by the Conseil scolaire acadien provincial and a campus of the Université Sainte-Anne. What is more, 14 Francophone provincial organizations are headquartered in Halifax, as well as the Alliance Française and Canadian Parents for French. Cultural, social, and recreational activities in French are regularly provided in Halifax all throughout the year. Mr. Chesson, I'm sorry. You're well over time. I actually gave you a little bit of extra time, but here I do have to cut you off. Perhaps during the questions, you can share the rest of what you have to say. So I have to cut you off there. My apologies. Colleagues, technicians are still working with Mr. Cote. He had about 2.5 minutes left in his opening remarks. Here's my proposal. I would suggest moving on to questions. Mr. Boucher, perhaps you could add something to your witness testimony. Inaudible? I could hear him, just not. He just wasn't very loud. Yes, but he wouldn't be interpreted, so there's the issue. Perhaps we could allow Mr. Boucher to add something, should he desire, but I do want to move on to questions, just given the time we have available. Well, thank you very much. It's a bit of a shame. He's the constitutional expert and the expert in language rights in Quebec. He's the one with expertise. He's better positioned to express the opinions of Droit Collectif Québec and the fact that there's redundancy given the presence of these regulations and the Charter of the French language. Also, the federal government has no organization like the OQLF, which is specialized in the language rights applicable to businesses. So the federal government is imposing a redundant piece of legislation, despite the fact that Quebec already has the perfect organization with all the expertise. As François noted, we have significant reservations about the draft as it is currently written. Yes, and I'm sorry about these technical issues. Our technicians are working with Mr. Cote. My hope is that he will be able to continue taking part in this discussion and answer questions from committee members. So we'll move on to questions. But before that, I'd like to welcome Denise Comeau des Hôtels from the Fédération Acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Our technicians are working with her as well so that she can deliver testimony. Our technicians have their work cut out for them today. Ms. Comeau des Hôtels, welcome. Could I ask you, please, to lower your microphone and just say a few words to ensure that interpreters, that the interpretation is working? Greetings, can you hear me? Can you talk for a total of 10 seconds? All right. We had some minor issues, but I think they're all resolved. Yeah. Good? Okay, we're good. All systems go. Welcome. Colleagues, we will now move on to questions and answers. We'll start with Mr. Godin for 6 minutes. Inaudible for the interpreter. Microphone, please. There we go. So please restart the clock. Mr. Chair, given the technical issues we have, I'll take the opportunity. I know that this is not an attack aimed at any specific organization, but it's always easier when people are actually in the room. I understand that witnesses are allowed to appear virtually, but now, unfortunately, we are getting incomplete testimony from Droit Collectif Quebec. And the lady from the Fédération Acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse was not able to deliver opening remarks. There's only limited opportunities to appear before a parliamentary committee, and witnesses would do well to take advantage of this time by coming in person. My question is for Mr. Chiasson. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble pronouncing your name. Mr. Chiasson, I enjoyed what you had to say. You're pragmatic. You're not asking for French language services coast to coast on every inch of land. You're asking for a few designated branches of businesses so that people can receive service in French. But here's the problem. How should we manage this? Do you have any proposals for possible regulations or specifications that could be inserted into the regulations? The government could look at what federal offices already do. For example, the RCMP. There are regulations governing where the RCMP is required to have offices serving francophones. For example, there is an office serving Halifax francophones, which we very much appreciate. So the government could use that model.
You said the RCMP consulted with you in order to see where they ought to serve the Francophone community. Were you consulted in the draft regulations and the use of French? Was your organization identified as an expert? No. Here's the issue. In my hands, I have a document from the Treasury Board. After an appearance here in committee, when we had a briefing, I don't really know how to say that in French, perhaps information session, of different regions where the percentage of Francophones is not high enough because the TBS said the rule is 10%.
En français.
Of a Francophone population. Unfortunately, a region like yours, the province of Nova Scotia, does not appear among the exceptions. You listed several cities. Among others, I think of a former colleague from Île-Madame. If he had been at this committee, I would have loved to work with him, but yes, there are quite a few Francophones there, but it's not quite at 10%. So it's unfortunate. And this week, we heard the FCFA told us about broadcasting.
Des outils, exemple, Halifax.
Halifax isn't even among this list. And Halifax is the Francophone Center. There are 8 Francophone schools, 14 organizations, a campus. And we're not saying that that businesses under federal jurisdiction have to serve people in French. Please give us tools. Please give us tools so that we can convince people. And I agree with the FCFA's proposition that all capitals, all provincial capitals, ought to be included, as well as territorial capitals. Moreover, in their recommendation, they're talking about bringing together hundreds of people, bringing the historical Francophone population together, like in the village of Chatiac. So the numbers will always vary. If we take the new electoral ridings, well, then that's 36% of the population, so we would qualify. Nova Scotia, to my knowledge, is not a bilingual province. The only bilingual province is New Brunswick. Correct. But Nova Scotia created, after citizen requests, a riding that is designated Francophone. That's quite something, then, isn't it? To not see Nova Scotia cities that are in a designated Francophone area on this list. I 100% agree with you. 20 seconds remain. Can we reduce the area? Can we go by school? Can we go by school catchment area, by dissemination area, by school board area? Please give us suggestions so that we can react, because this is completely unacceptable. My apologies, time is up. I would ask a one-sentence response. We agree with the recommendation that the FCFA put forward. That includes all of the points that Mr. Godin just mentioned. Thank you very much. Mr. Villeneuve, 6 minutes. Thank you to my colleague, and I recognize Mr. Godin's passion. Mr. Chiasson, I have an open question, and take all the time you need. What do you think about areas with high levels of francophones in the draft regulations? As mentioned in our report, we agree that with the 3 suggested areas, but we think we need to add Halifax. We need to add Schadekamp. And we could even, for instance, cities that are quite large, like Saguenay, Truro, in Yarmouth. But Truro and Sydney, there's a considerable Francophone presence there. There are 2 French schools with over 300 students. So there is a Francophone community there. We're not asking that a private business has to offer French services in all branches, but one, so that the community can immediately identify and know where to go to be served in French in the designated area. Thank you. I saw my colleague, Mr. Autremont, nodding when you spoke. If those cities were added, what would the tangible impact be for you? Historically, Nova Scotia and the Acadian regions that are part of the historical areas, Clare, Argyll, Schadekamp, Richmond, well, over time, those communities also woke up. They asked for schools. They asked for services in French. That includes Truro, Sydney, Annapolis Valley, the South Shore with Bridgewater. So there are 12 regions. 12 regions with organizations that are fighting to preserve the French language and Acadian culture. So if we could add another element like that one, that would only enrich and help those areas to be able to continue to survive and to preserve their language and allow the vitality of their language and culture. And what qualifications should be taken into account to designate an area with a high Francophone presence? We agree with the FCFA's recommendation of around 400 inhabitants if there are 400 Francophone inhabitants, it should be designated, and preserving historic communities, including my hometown, having Francophone institutes to preserve the designated sector here. And in the 12 regions that I mentioned, there are Francophone institutions. Thank you. We have around 2.5 minutes left. What issues or advantages do you see regarding the coherence between the federal regime, especially Part 4 and 7 on the OLA, and the law on the use of French in federally regulated private businesses? Wow, what a question. In my opinion, the use of French in private businesses would only support the other elements of the Act, as well as the other services put in place by the OLA. It would strengthen that and help us in our development. Thank you. Finally, how did the coalition, what's your opinion on how the Federally Regulated Businesses Act could help OLMCs? Well, we would feel respected by those private businesses. The Francophone and Acadian communities would feel respected. And as I mentioned in my presentations, we're not asking that all branches serve in French. I think if we went to Halifax and if we went into a bank, if we just asked how many employees are Francophone, we would at least find some Francophone employees that could all be sent to one branch and not spread out throughout the city. And in that branch, it would be easy to identify them, and that's where we could go to be served in French. And I guarantee you people would take advantage of that. 30 seconds. If we had a magic wand and you had one wish, what would your wish be? It would be to apply the recommendations given by the FCFA and our recommendations, that Halifax be included, and especially Truro and Sydney, cities where there's a considerable Francophone population because of the scope of the Francophone school system. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Chair. Thank you, Mr. Villeneuve. Before going to Mr. Beaulieu, Mr. Cote, I know that our technical team was working with you. Can I ask you to speak for 10 seconds, just about, so that we can do a sound test? Interpretation will resume after the sound test.
Pour le dire franchement, nous voyons dans le projet de règlement une entreprise d'empiètement fédéral sur l'autonomie politique et juridique du Québec en matière linguistique qui...
Thank you, Mr. Cote. The sound is good. Thank you, Mr. Cote. Mr. Beaulieu. With the technical problems, I think they haven't gotten as much time. Can we give them 2 minutes to finish their speech? Well, because we had to start with questions while the technical team worked with them, I gave extra time to the organization, but I just asked Mr. Boucher to speak on behalf of the organization. So I did give them their 5 minutes, just like the other organization had 5 minutes. But listen, during the Q&A, MPs can ask information, but the time was equal, I promise. Over to you, Mr. Beaulieu, for 6 minutes. Mr. Cote, would you like some time to finish your presentation quickly? Otherwise, I do have questions. Perfect. Thank you very much. Now, points. The draft regulation infringes on Quebec rights regarding French. Do not forget that if this regulation will have impacts outside of Quebec, within Quebec, they're finding themselves they are fully infringing on the Charter of the French language that already fully applies to federally regulated private businesses, not only since 1967 with the Charter, but in a clear way with the law of Bill 96. So they're creating a legal problem in order to squabble over the Constitution. Moreover, for a regime, for a less effective language regime than the law in the French language. In Quebec, there are 370 federally regulated private businesses, and among them, over 300 of them are signed up and do comply with the OQLF, and only 12 do not comply. So you shouldn't see a problem where there's no issue, and the regime in the draft regulations would only apply to businesses of 100 employees and more, and that's not good. We also denounced the fact that the commissioner, the language, or the official languages commissioner, but the commissioner is in charge of the public sector. However, the OQLF has 49 years of experience with private businesses, and that's simply swept aside. Moreover, the OQLF can impose fines. And in the OQLF, they are able to investigate, unlike the commissioner. So we wait for a complaint to be, we wait for a complaint rather than proactively investigating. And no one dares to complain. And finally, this brings up the whole question of the regime of opt-in and opt-out. At the time being, it'll automatically apply unless a business asks to be covered under the OQLF. It wants to respect only in appearance the OQLF, but in reality, I think it's not the fact. How many businesses are going to actually do that? I don't think many of them will. So the draft regulation is creating a legal problem where there wasn't, and wants to evict Quebec out of its own jurisdiction where it already had the legal right to deal with the issue. And so it's federal infringement on Quebec's language rights, and our recommendation is to remove Quebec from the application of the draft regulations, or at the very least, offer an opt-in rather than an opt-out option. I also asked a question regarding the official languages commissioners. There are no AMPs planned. The commissioner does apparently have a power.
Sans sanction. Alors,
has compliance order power. What do you think about that? This compliance order power is a recommendation, and this recommendation can be followed up voluntarily. And if it's not, well, then they can sue the business before the federal court. However, that's putting the burden on that's putting a burden on just an employee. And the commissioner has very limited power. And at the end of the day, if the business says, no, I don't want to listen to the recommendation of the commissioner, and I'm going to continue to not comply, well, then it's up to the individual to go before the courts. And it's not quite clear. You talked about hundreds of people. Now, this is supposed to apply to businesses of 25 employees and more. And unlike to Bill 101, there's no mechanism in place to promote French.
aux employeurs qui en auraient besoin, qui sont récalcitrants.
Of the UFA. And the list of the employees of federally regulated private businesses, well, that's at the discretion of the minister that will negotiate agreements that will allow or not for Bill 101 to apply to federally regulated private businesses. and then send out the list of applicable businesses. So I think that all of this will simply lead to additional costs and less efficiency. My apologies. Your time is up, and I must cut you off. Now, second round. I'll be quite strict with time because I want us to be able to get through our second round without compressing it. And now, first, welcome to Madame Cousy visiting us today. Thank you. At the beginning, I started my career here at the Official Languages Committee, so it's a real pleasure to be back, Mr. Chair. Excellent. That's a good sign. I'm from Alberta. That's a good sign for Arkers as well. So now, second round. Mr. Bélanger, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. I will admit that I don't know much about the language situation in Quebec, but I do have a question for Collective Rights Quebec. How should federal policies better reflect the linguistic reality of Quebec, where French is a majority language but remains vulnerable? First, and above all, thank you for the question. First, federal respect of the situation of Quebec in Quebec, which is vulnerable and threatened because of its geographic reality in North America. That's simply a fact, and it's been known and recognized in the last amendments to the OLA. The first thing to do would be to more respect the autonomy and jurisdiction of Quebec, to respect the autonomy and jurisdiction of the National Assembly, instead of trying to create a parallel regime. Regarding protecting French in Quebec, the Quebec legislator is the person the best set to create a linguistic regime. Now, regarding the federal institutions, the modernization of the OLA is a step in the right direction, even if its implementation leaves something to be desired. My recommendation is leave the Charter of the French language do its work.
And if that's unacceptable, then the federal government should at the very least fully model its language regime on the Charter of the French language, because right now they're misaligned. The federal regime is less strict, it has less punishments built in, it will be less effective. So my number one choice would be to let Quebec do its job, but if the federal government insists on layering its regime on top of our own, then it should at the very least fully model its regime on our own to make it more effective. Thank you very much. I'll move on to my next question. Mr. Chiasson. Nova Scotia resembles Northern Ontario more than Quebec does. What are the main challenges that Francophone and Acadian communities are facing as they seek to access service in French from federal agencies and private businesses? Well, when it comes to availability of services, more needs to be done to ensure active offer. And to ensure that the existing services can be improved. That's the case for federal agencies. As for private businesses, even more work has to be done because competencies would need to be developed in my region and in yours. There's a certain minimum capacity there. We could boost that. And it would lead to only good things, both in my region and in yours. Has the modernization of the OLA improved the situation on the ground? The modernization of the OLA has had a ripple effect, including on Francophone immigration. But if we really want to restore the demographic weight that we had in 1971, a lot more needs to be done. So we are working very hard with IRCC and the province to ramp up the number of Francophone immigrants settling in our region. So, and we still have a long road ahead. You have 35 seconds. Mr. Cote talked about redundant regimes. We see that the numerical criteria used are not fully in line with on-the-ground realities, and you have said that perhaps federations and associations representing Francophone OLMCs would be better placed to determine which regions require services. What do you think about that? I think that's a great idea. I think we're well positioned, and every day we work with regional organizations who understand the reality on the ground and the needs on the ground. We are currently studying the status of the Francophone community in Nova Scotia. We will publish a report in the fall, and I think we're better placed. I think you're better placed as well, better placed than the government. Your time is up, Mr. Bélanger. We will now move on to Mr. d'Entremont. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Finally, I have an opportunity to speak to a fellow Nova Scotian, and more specifically, the Fédération Acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse, a key partner working for the well-being of Francophones and Acadians in Nova Scotia. Jules, greetings, and hello to you as well, Denise. I see you. I have been working on Francophone Nova Scotian issues for 25 years. And now the government is designating various regions in Nova Scotia. In Nova Scotian history, we have seen that Francophones are spread out, but our shared language brings us together. Could you talk about the distance between various Francophone regions and the difficulty this causes for offering French language services at the government level or in the private sector? Just a quick historical aside. When the Acadians came back to Nova Scotia after the deportation, the English-speaking government did its best to scatter us all throughout the province so that we would not have any political power in numbers. We have Acadians all throughout the province, from Cheticamp and Richmond on one side, all the way to the opposite coast. We are spread out every which way. It's as though we are holding up the province from either end, keeping it up out of the sea. It can take 8 or 9 hours of driving to cross the province, so our communities are very distant from one another. When it comes to communications, in certain regions, there's no self-service. So if you go to Torbek, which is a new Acadian community, you certainly shouldn't rely on your GPS because you will get lost. You'll have no idea where you're going. So communication services in that region need to be improved. When it comes to education, and that's provincial, but when it comes to federal services as well, there are challenges because we're not talking about one community, we're talking about 12 communities. Nova Scotia has a French Language Services Act, which strives to identify specific regions. And one issue that comes up is that the largest Francophone community today is in Halifax, Dartmouth. So can you talk about the current state of services in that region? Halifax is a very important city at the national level, at the international level. There are conferences that take place there, bilingual ones often, because sometimes national and international organizations hold their conferences in Halifax. But also, there's 15 to 20,000 Francophones. There's 8 Francophone schools. There are French language activities available on a daily basis. There are 14 organizations headquartered there. And when it comes to private businesses, the 14 local organizations are trying to get together in a shared headquarters, which would be located in central Halifax. Perhaps we would also have a campus of the Université Sainte-Anne there, and perhaps that could be a hub for Francophone businesses as well. It would be a good opportunity to enforce these draft regulations. The other problem I've noticed is that services vary by region, like in Argyll and Clare, where Denise is. Federal services are few and far between. There's a few offices here or there, but not much. What services would you like to see in these regions? And especially with in Greenwood as well, with the military presence there. You are almost out of time, so please be concise. Yes, the military presence is growing, so the community is growing as well. And as for Halifax, it's an important city. It's one of Canada's largest cities. It's one of the largest cities in Eastern Canada specifically. It should be able to offer services in French for the local community. Thank you, Mr. d'Entremont. We will move over to Mr. Beaulieu. You have 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much. First, for my friend from Droit Collectif Québec. According to the modernized OLA, the government is supposed to promote French in Quebec. Did they consult you about this before developing the draft regulations? Have they contacted any number of Quebec institutions? We were not consulted up till now, of course. To my understanding, no Quebec civil society organization was consulted. Per our research, the federal government has never consulted Quebec civil society during the development of the modernized OLA. Okay. Also, the Use of French Act will not promote French through the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages. The minister will have that role. It will be the job of the department. What are your thoughts on that? Wouldn't that lead to a conflict of interest? I would say so. It does open the door to conflicts of interest, but it also opens the door to an overly spread out effort which would cause the French language to fall through the cracks. We risk being caught up in a ping-pong game, being sent from one agency to the next, instead of enjoying truly effective regulations. We believe that the draft regulations should be heavily revised to ensure internal consistency, and we also believe they should not apply in Quebec. Thank you very much, Mr. Chasson. We talked about the various details that need to be improved, but if you look at the history of Nova Scotia Acadians, people don't talk enough about all of the laws that were passed to ban French language education. The government deliberately worked to assimilate Nova Scotia Acadians. Your time is up, so please answer in just one sentence. Yes, historically, we were forced to fight and even go before the courts to secure our language rights. But a lot of progress has been made since then, especially in recent years. And currently, things are positive when it comes to the development of our communities, our language, and our culture. Thank you very much, Mr. Beaulieu. Mr. Dalton, you have the floor, 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chasson. And I would like to thank your organization for being here and for waging battle and for achieving significant things. Could you talk a little bit about immigration and the impact of immigration on the Nova Scotia Francophone community? When it comes to Francophone immigration, we have seen an improvement at the national level. I think the government will meet the 9% target for Francophone settlement outside Quebec. But as for Nova Scotia specifically, we just have 0.9% Francophone immigration as of 2025. We are having trouble recruiting immigrants. And unfortunately, we lack the support of the province in recruiting immigrants. As for IRCC, we do receive support from them, but it's pretty lukewarm. And then we have even more difficulties retaining immigrants. Only 73% of immigrants remain in Atlantic Canada as compared to Ontario, where it's over 90%. So we have major issues with both recruitment and retention. Thank you very much. I'll yield the floor to Mr. Godin for the rest of my time. Thank you, colleagues. Honourable Chair, I have a question for Mr. Cote. Earlier, you said, let Quebec do its job. Well, I agree with you. If you have been following this file, you will have seen that the Conservatives have had a very clear position. So has the NDP, so has the Bloc Québécois. All of us believe that in Quebec, all federally regulated private businesses ought to be subject to the Office québécois de la langue française. And the minister at the time, Jean-François Roberge, just before the time ran out, made a deal with the Liberal government of the day to have both regimes in place. Are you fine with that? And if you doubt any of what I have to say, you can talk to the NDP, you can talk to the Bloc, and you can talk to us. The media was very clear about our positions. I would like to hear your opinion on all of this. You're asking me for a political opinion, so I will give it the floor to my colleague. But before I do that, the Trudeau government largely forced the Quebec minister's hand. I'm not sure Minister Roberge truly had a choice. The federal bill was about to pass. So I don't know if the federal Quebec government had full latitude to act as it desired. I don't have much to add on to that. Just that, in our view, these draft regulations will not improve the situation in Quebec. Federally regulated private businesses in Quebec are already subject to an even better regime. I'll phrase my question differently. What if the Modernized Official Languages Act had forced Quebec to fall under the jurisdiction of the Charter of the French Language? Would that have worked? Yes, absolutely. Okay, I have another question. Today, the government has given us a fait accompli. And your CEO seems to think that Minister Roberge had his hand forced. And sorry, I've completely lost my train of thought because I was keeping one eye on the clock. But I was going to ask whether it would be possible to modify the regulations and clearly write into legislation that in Quebec, the Office québécois de la langue française has the mandate of enforcing the regulations. Give them the mandate over Quebec. We need a one-sentence answer because you are well over time. I think that if the Quebec National Assembly is competent enough, I think the federal parliament would be able to properly amend the bill. We'll go over to Ms. Mingarelli, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. I will start with you, Mr. Boucher. In your view, is the regime under the Use of French Act equivalent to that under the Charter of the French Language? In a nutshell, no, absolutely not. This law doesn't go anywhere near as far. It doesn't contain any penalty regime. It doesn't contain any compliance mechanism, so no, it doesn't go far enough. As I was noting in my discussion with Mr. Godin. Thank you. In your view, does the federal government have the right to issue laws and regulations in areas under its jurisdiction? I'll give the floor to Mr. Cote for that one. We're here talking about the federal government meddling in areas outside its jurisdiction and imposing redundant regulations. We are talking about local businesses headquartered in Quebec. Under the 1867 Constitution, the jurisdiction is of Quebec. The federal government is coming in at an angle, trying to govern federally regulated private businesses. Both Quebec and the federal government have jurisdiction over the private sector, and our view is that Quebec ought to be able to legislate in areas of it that concern it. Thank you very much. I will now turn to you, Mr. Chasson. Are you satisfied with the draft regulations in the current form? I think the intention is good, and the draft regulations are a step in the right direction. I like the idea of federally regulated private businesses offering more services in French, but there are improvements to be made when it comes to how regions are designated.
It would be better if we could offer services without it being too difficult for the businesses to apply it. Be it in a big area like Halifax, as I mentioned in my presentation, a certain branch could offer services in French. It wouldn't be more expensive. They could simply send all the French-speaking employees to one branch and designate it that way. Thank you. And do you have any changes to suggest to the committee today? Yes, absolutely. If we could apply the FCFA's recommendations that they presented Wednesday on the 26th, especially regarding designated regions, that would really help us. So, thank you. How much time do I have? 2 minutes. What do you think of the regions with a high Francophone presence suggested by the draft regulations? When we talk about regions, I think that's considered 20%. That needs to go down in order to include more regions. If we want to see a real impact so that the Act can help our Acadian Francophone community, all the regions where there's a Francophone Acadian presence that has a social, recreational life, well, we need to be able to help them. Thank you. And could you tell me, how do you react to the FCFA's situation using the dissemination areas? We support the recommendations, the FCFA's recommendations, yes. Thank you, that's all. Thank you. On behalf of the committee, I would like to thank all of our witnesses for being here today, for your work, for your appearance. I will briefly suspend so we can swap out our panelists. Thank you, everyone.
collègues, re-bienvenue à...
Welcome back to meeting number 36. Pursuant to Article 108.3F and the motion passed April 21st, 2026, we meet here today to study the draft regulation on the use of French in federally regulated private businesses. Now, I would like to welcome our witnesses from WestJet Airlines, Lynn Chiney, VP Guest Experience and Vacations. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Yes. And Tristan Joannette, Legal Counsel. Welcome. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. And afterwards, we will move to questions from MPs. Excellent. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us to appear before you today. We appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the work of this committee, particularly its role in promoting both French and English and supporting the vitality of official language minority communities across Canada. My name is Lynn Chaillet. I am VP Guest Experience and Vacations Quebec for the WestJet Group. I am joined today by my colleague, Tristan Joannette, Legal Counsel at WestJet. At WestJet, we refer to our passengers as guests. That choice reflects our commitment to creating an experience that is welcoming, respectful, and human, one where everyone feels welcome. In the Canadian context, that includes providing high-quality service in both French and in English. Earlier this week, we had a constructive discussion with the members of the Standing Senate Committee on Official Languages on many of the issues that bring us here today, and we are pleased to continue that discussion with members of the Lang Committee.
WestJet has undergone significant changes. The integration of Sunwings Airlines operations into WestJet, completed in May of 2025, transformed our network and expanded our presence in several markets. Cette intégration avec Sunwing représente une occasion.
This integration with Sunwing gives us a responsibility as well as an opportunity. We can review our ways of our best practices and improve the experience for our French customers. It is in this context that WestJet undertook significant work to strengthen its French language services, work that is already well underway across several areas of our operations. This includes the in-flight experience, guest communications, public-facing travel documents, airport services, and more broadly, the overall travel experience. For us, this is not only about regulatory compliance, it is also an important part of the guest experience and of the relationship of trust we want to build with French-speaking travelers across the country. Allow me to provide a few examples of measures WestJet has implemented over the past year to improve its French language services. We have taken steps to ensure that all flight attendants based in Montreal, as well as those assigned to our seasonal Quebec City base, are bilingual. We have updated our procedures for onboard announcements in order to strengthen the presence of French in the in-flight experience. We have also updated our onboard menus and in-flight magazine to ensure that French and English content are presented with equal prominence, appearance, and accessibility. We have improved the French language technological experience, including on our website. We have also improved French language service on our telephone lines. We have reviewed and improved our airport signage procedures. Internally, we continue to develop new language policies, including a general language policy and a policy related to the use of technology in French. We are also continuing work to establish a French language committee in collaboration with our union partners. This work is ongoing, but our commitment is clear and long-term. We want to continue making concrete progress in order to better meet the expectations of our French-speaking guests, Francophone communities, whether in Quebec, Acadia, Ontario, Western Canada, the territories, or elsewhere across the country, expect to be able to travel and interact with air carriers in their language. WestJet wants to continue being a constructive partner in the implementation of this new regulatory framework under the Use of French in Federally Regulated Private Businesses Act and the draft regulations that are the subject of our discussions today.
Important that any regulatory framework in the area remain practical, flexible, and adapted to the operational realities faced by airlines. Alors que nous regardons vers l'avenir et les besoins.
As we look to the future and WestJet's growing need for a bilingual workforce, we believe it is essential to continue promoting bilingualism across Canada and to strengthen access to French language education and training from coast to coast. We see this issue as a shared responsibility, and we want to continue working constructively with governments, communities, and partners to advance French language services within the aviation sector. In conclusion, we are proud to be here today and to contribute to this discussion. Thank you again for welcoming us today. We would be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. And now, Mr. Godin, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being in person. It's always technically much easier, so we really appreciate it. Madame Chaillet, first, can you give us an explanation of the percentage? I don't want to get into business secrets here. How many Francophone clients do you serve at the moment, including Sunwing clients, percentages? Thank you very much for the question. We don't have exact numbers that we can give you, but the overall situation is as follows. WestJet is headquartered in Calgary, is more known in the west than in the east. Sunwing, including Sunwing Airlines, has a national presence and a well-established presence in Quebec, with stewards, pilots, etc., that were headquartered in Quebec and Montreal. So today, the majority of our Francophone clientele is in Quebec, but we do have Francophone clients all over Quebec. We talk about the regulation today. It's exactly that kind of situation. So the current percentage in WestJet is lower. However, going forward, we're expecting it to rise significantly all over Canada and especially in Quebec. Thank you, Madame Chaillet. How many employees speak French in your business? How many employees first, and how many employees speak French? Bilingual or unilingual? Do you have any unilingual French employees? Unilingual French employees? No, to be honest. At WestJet, including Sunwing, 16,000 employees, a bit all over Canada, because obviously after COVID there was work from home. Now we have employees all throughout Canada, from the Atlantic provinces to Vancouver. We did try and get more data on our employees, notably how many of them are bilingual. Do you have any numbers? We unfortunately do not have any numbers. We did undertake a poll with our employees. Unfortunately, there are some employees who will clearly say, yes, I'm bilingual, but when we move forward to say spoken and written, that's fine, thank you. I have limited time, so unfortunately I must interrupt you. When you bought Sunwing, I thought that you closed the Quebec base for air hosts. Yes, we did that last March, but we opened it on a seasonal basis. So when there's more operational needs, we reopen. So pilots and flight attendants can reapply and operate from there in Quebec. So all employees based in Montreal and in Quebec are bilingual, yes. Is the Francophone market a market you want to further develop? Yes, absolutely. It's a really key market for us, and it's growing. That's why we're doing all of this, all the examples I just gave you, in order to grow that clientele. You gave us some examples, but just as a consumer, I went on Google. I typed in WestJet. The website, I can't even get the French version of the website. You said you did lots of things, but if you want to develop a market, here's a tip. Maybe the website should be in French and in English. You see what I mean? Is that a blip? Okay, you have the menu in the airline, but if there's no passengers in front of the menu, that's why I'm asking. Is the Francophone market that major for you? The website is in French. It's just that you have to go all the way down and then select your language. We're reviewing that, in fact, to make it easier. Ah, I see. Because normally it's top right, so we're going to change the website, but it is available in French as well. I just thought I didn't want to create any confusion, but your webmaster, well, should definitely put that top right to develop that market. Speaking of costs, regulation adds on costs. Do you have a cost estimate on the impact of this new act? I'll let my colleague take that. The quick answer is no.
Entrer dans les détails sur la façon que ça fonctionne.
To get into details on how that works in WestJet, there are different departments with different budgets, and regulatory compliance is already part of some departments. Some departments will have to revise their budget based on these change regulations, but we do have an Excel sheet with all the tasks to comply to the new regulation, and those elements have not yet been costed. Last question, because I don't have much time. We're aware that you're in a very competitive market. You do not have the same status as Air Canada about the obligations. You have obligations, but Air Canada has more. Is that a competitive advantage for you? To not be completely subject to the OLA? 15 seconds, so please, quick response. I'll take this. It's a parliamentary choice to treat the two airlines differently. Air Canada has a very different past. Our advantage is to offer service in French. Every service we offer in French is an advantage. We see it as an investment, something that will allow us to seek out the Francophone market. Mr. Gaudin, I must cut you off there. Thank you. Mr. El-Khoury. Thank you, and welcome to our witnesses. Madame Chair, you mentioned that we need to continue to promote the two languages. Can you give us an example of what you're doing within your business to promote the two languages? Example. If members of your staff want to learn French or improve their French, are French classes available to them? Or will you offer those services?
En fait, on est vraiment dans un processus actuellement là, de...
We're really in a process of Francization in our business. So examples that I gave you are things that we already put in place since last May. We do still have steps. We went in 2 phases. First phase was really everything external, so client-facing, be it in-flight, website, etc. That was our priority. Then we went internally. Now we ensure that we have a Francization committee with our different union partners. We're applying with the OQLF for WestJet in Quebec. And to answer your question regarding training, that's something that we are considering at the time being. We are trying to hire bilingual staff, but there are also unilingual Anglophones who are interested in learning French, and that is a discussion we are having with HR.
Well, I hope these discussions lead to the opening of a Francization department to offer learning opportunities to those who are seeking them. My second question is for Mr. Joannette. Let's say a flight leaves from Vancouver or Calgary en route to Ottawa. What would be the obligations under the Act? Would the flight attendants have rights under the Act? What about the passengers? Thank you for that question. Currently, under the Official Languages Act, airport and passenger services must be offered in French and English. This obligation applies to airport authorities, which pass the obligations on to carriers. So in that example, at the check-in counter in Vancouver, you would have the right to be served in French. As for on the flight, flights between Vancouver and Calgary would not lead to obligations because those regions are not designated, but Ottawa is. So a flight from Calgary to Ottawa would have in-flight service in French. But airport services in Vancouver would be in French. Same for services at the Calgary airport, and same when the flight touches down in Ottawa. On the flight, the services would only be offered, say, between Calgary and Ottawa. If you look at other flights, where do rights begin and where do they end? Well, under the regulations in their current wording, all flights taking off from and landing in Quebec will be subject to the regulations. So if you are taking a flight to or from Quebec, you will be served in French on board the flight. As for other regions, well, we have flights to Sudbury and North Bay. We also have flights to Fredericton and Moncton, which have been designated under the regulations. So all flights from, say, Calgary to Fredericton, Calgary to Moncton, Calgary to North Bay, Calgary to Sudbury, all of those flights would include in-flight service in French, along with all the flights to and from Quebec. If I may, to add on to that, even if French language service is not officially offered on a flight, we will have pre-recorded messages which will always be bilingual, so for the benefit of our Francophone guests. So safety announcements and announcements regarding in-flight services will be bilingual on all of our flights. Thank you very much. Ms. Chayer, what do you think of the new regime the government is proposing regarding which would apply to federally regulated private businesses? Do you mean the regulations we're discussing? Yes? Okay. Well, in my opening remarks, I noted that we strongly support these regulations. We're just asking for a certain amount of flexibility to be built in so we can implement the regulations. We have already been preparing for a few months, knowing that the regulations will come into effect in Quebec much more quickly than they will in the rest of the country, in the designated zones where it will take 2 years. But it takes a lot of preparation for a business to comply with these regulations, especially an aviation business. In aviation, we're subject to a lot of regulations by Transport Canada and other agencies. So we just hope that we will have enough time and flexibility to apply the regulations. Mr. El-Khoury, you are out of time. Thank you very much. I will now move over to Mr. Beaulieu. 6 minutes. Thank you. I was reading through the press releases in 2024, not so long ago. Some customers were unable to access French language services on WestJet, and your response was, well, we're not a bilingual airline. Has there been improvement since 2024? And if so, what have you done to change the situation? I don't remember the event you are referring to. However, between 2024 and today, a lot has changed. As I noted earlier, WestJet used to be primarily based in the Canadian West, so flight attendants would mostly come from Calgary. Since then, we have acquired Sunwing, which has given us access to bilingual employees here. I was going to say here in Quebec, but we're not in Quebec, we're in Ottawa. bilingual employees who will be able to serve a Francophone clientele. So today, we have access to flight attendants that we did not have access to back in 2024. Well, this incident took place on WestJet, and the flight attendant said that English is the only official language. Elsewhere in Quebec, are there unilingual Anglophone employees? Rather, than in Quebec. Yes, there are unilingual Anglophone employees in Calgary, but none in Quebec. Or rather, there are no unilingual Francophone employees in Quebec. Isn't that discriminatory? I wouldn't say so. On our flights, we have to offer service in both official languages. So we need flight attendants who are able to work nationally. For that reason, we always offer services in both official languages. As for Sunwing Vacations, we've just acquired them. There's an office in Laval with 200 employees, and again, we hire bilingual employees there. Because if anyone gets in touch with the call center, maybe they want to book group travel, the call center needs to be able to offer service in both official languages. Well, sure, but you have unilingual Anglophone employees, so you should have unilingual Francophone ones as well. It seems a little bit imbalanced. You're asking for all the Quebec employees to be bilingual, but you're fine with unilingual employees in the rest of Canada. If I might answer that, this is something our Francization Committee will look into. Before requiring English in Quebec, we want to make sure that this requirement is strictly necessary for the hiring process. There are a number of measures under the Quebec Charter of the French language which govern requirements for languages other than French, and we want to comply with that. Are you subject to the Charter of the French language? That's an obligation we have. We're not talking about the Federal Act here. No, the Quebec Charter of the French language. You need a certain level of Francization after 6 months and another level after a year. That's the process we're working through. We look to sign up with the OQLF in short order. But even with the Use of French Act, we see languages other than French being used in Quebec. If I may weigh in, Sunwing was already registered with the Quebec Office Québécois de la Langue Française. So Sunwing had already gone through all the necessary steps, and now WestJet is working through them. What about your board? Do people speak French on your board? What about your CEO? Or on our board, we have 2 people able to speak French. Our CEO and board chair both speak French. They're European, so they're well aware of multilingualism and the importance of different languages. So if you're already subject to the Charter of the French language, I suppose you don't need to sign up under the federal regime. Well, it will become an option. It will be an optional in Quebec. We'll be able to choose which regimes to fall under, and outside Quebec, we will fall under the federal regime. Have you compared the 2 sets of regulations, and what are your thoughts on them? Very quickly, they're very similar. They might not be identical, but they're very similar. I believe departmental officials came before you to talk about the committees set up in partnership with the OQLF to better align the 2 regimes. So the question for us is, do we want to be subject to 2 different regimes, the OQLF one and the federal one, or do we want to transfer everything to the federal government and fall under just one regime? We don't find major substantial differences between the 2 regimes, and I suppose you haven't made a decision yet. We will probably be going with the federal government for practical reasons. After all, we will already be subject to it outside Quebec. So it will be easier for us to just centralize everything with the federal government. Mr. Beaulieu, you are well over time. Thank you. Colleagues, we will now move on to the second round. I will give the floor to Mr. Dalton. 5 minutes, please. Thank you. Thank you to the witnesses. Your presentation was very positive about your company, which is all very well and good, but I didn't hear a lot of grievances coming from you. Normally, when businesses and organizations come before us, they come to us with suggestions about what should be done. Are you just so satisfied with the regulations that you're willing to give us top marks? Because if you do have suggestions, now is the time to make them. This is a study of the regulations. We hope to make recommendations. Do you truly have nothing to suggest, or are you simply giving the government the thumbs up? We do have a few recommendations. Okay, I didn't hear any. Okay, we have a few small regulations. Yes, things can always be improved. Here's an example. It's heavily technical, but take contracts of adhesion. Currently, contracts of adhesion must be presented to employees in French in Quebec, but the term contract of adhesion is a civil law concept. Its definition exists only under the Quebec Civil Code. It is not present in common law. So when the regulations go into effect in common law jurisdictions, people will start asking questions about what a contract of adhesion is supposed to mean. So perhaps the regulation should be updated to include a definition of contract of adhesion. It's defined in the Civil Code, but not in common law jurisdictions. That would be one practical thing that could be improved. That's just one example. Another example is when the Committee for Promoting French is established, maybe half of employees could come from the employer and half could be made up of employees. These organizations are well-defined in Quebec law, but not so much in common law. So perhaps the minister could issue orders in council or write something into the regulations. Currently, committees to promote French are well-defined in Quebec law. Also, in Quebec, unions are required to get together and appoint people. But this is not current practice, so perhaps the various unions could select people on their own. When the gazetting process begins and a more formal process kicks off, we will be submitting recommendations in writing. Thank you very much. But if you have recommendations, please send them to us. There are places in Western Canada with a strong Francophone presence. Parts of Edmonton, Beauséjour. We're talking about major urban centers here, like Edmonton. Are you ready for hiring? Are you having issues with recruitment? Do you have the number of fluent French speakers that you need? Just let's talk a little bit about recruitment. And I used to be a secondary school teacher, so my question for you is, do you set up booths in immersion schools or Francophone schools, perhaps to reach out to grade 12s? You have about 1 minute left. Well, I'll try to keep within that. Thank you for the question. To answer your question, as for pilots, we lack the number of bilingual pilots required to serve all the airports that we we currently service. So we will need to hire more bilingual pilots or make current pilots bilingual, but that will be a challenge. I think any business appearing before the committee will say the same thing, that it can be difficult to hire a qualified bilingual workforce. This will be the biggest challenge we face over the next 2 years. We will have to be creative, as we always are, and figure out solutions. Maybe we could set up booths in high schools. Maybe we could partner with educational institutions or different organizations. There are a number of organizations in Quebec that provide subsidies and training to employees. Perhaps we will look at all the available solutions, and our hope is that in 2 years we will be able to offer the required services. But yes, labor issues are the main issue we are facing. And I think this is the case all throughout the country. We know that building schools and educating people from the ground up takes time, but this is a recommendation that we are making. It's one way the federal government and the provinces can help things by offering French classes or French language education in different regions. I do have to cut you off there. Thank you very much. We will now move over to Ms. Chanette. You will have 5 minutes. Ms. Chaillet, Mr. Joannette, thank you for being here today. First, I'd really like to commend you on your commitment and your engagement to offer services and employment in French. This is music to our ears. Now, earlier, we were talking about the whole notion of UFA versus OQLF. And Mr. Joannette, you said it would make things easier if you fall under one regime. But you're an airline. You're used to being subject to all sorts of different regulations. What would be so terrible about falling under 2 linguistic regimes? Well, I would say that currently the requirements under the 2 regimes are very similar, so it would make only a procedural difference. When you deal with 2 different regulators, you're communicating with 2 different entities. There might be some minor differences between the 2 regimes, which could lead to a conflict or at the very least confusion. Because of this, we would prefer to fall under one authority, either the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages or the department, and that would make things easier procedurally. For example, when registering, we would have to register just once instead of twice. It's not a major difference, but there are procedural differences there. It would make our life easier. It would cut red tape. But it wouldn't be any major issue to fall under both regimes because, after all, you're an airline. You already are registered fall under the OQLF, and you noted that the UFA is rather similar. At the end of the day, the main issue is finding bilingual employees. As Mr. Dalton noted, some other experts have suggested expanding the territory where these regulations would apply to include provincial capitals and also big cities like Toronto and Halifax. Would this be a major issue for you? I'd be happy to answer that. I know that the government has made a decision to use certain measures. It's just one step in a longer process.
And the designated areas in the first version of the OLA aren't the same as the current version. When this regulation will come into force, there will be a real workforce issue, and it'll be hard to get the required workforce to offer services. If we include capital, for instance, capitals, including Edmonton, the way the regulation is set out, all flights to and from Edmonton will now have to offer service in French. Same for Victoria and BC. That would be a major step. In a perfect world, WestJet would absolutely like to offer French in all of their flights. But to reach that, they need staff, and we're really proud to see what the federal government is doing in education. Considerable sums invested in French education outside of Quebec, agreements with Alberta for French schools. That's really key. That must continue. We invite the government to do more in that vein, and that will train the workforce of tomorrow. That will perhaps in the future allow us to expand those areas. But for the time being, the balance that the minister has struck is doable. I don't have much time left. Quick question. From throughout the country, the 2 official languages are very important in order to attract investments. We feel that Canada will really reinforce that application of the 2 official languages. That should help you with the francophonie throughout Canada. How do you plan to use new technology in learning? Are you thinking about that? Because human contact is important, but have you looked into any technological options for training? Yes. That's part of our process in phase 2 internally, to have the tools that we will use. Yes, there are so many different technological tools, AI among others. We are considering all technology to see once, and we'll go based on priority and according to our HR and financial resources what we can put in place, but we are considering those options, and in the future we will continue to consider them. For the time being, our priority is to ensure that all of our guests are served in both official languages and that our French is spotless everywhere, and we're still working on developing certain things. Thank you. Now, Mr. Beaulieu, 2.5 minutes. You said that at the time being you're subject to the Charter of the French language, but you plan to withdraw from that to go with the federal regime. Is that correct? As an airline transporter. So we have 2 businesses. We have Sunwing, which is a tour operator with HQ in Laval, 200 employees. That will always be subject to the OQLF. So every year we send all of our information, the external signage was reviewed, etc. So that will be maintained. However, for WestJet, so because they're established in Quebec, so it's not really under federal jurisdiction. Yes, that's why WestJet Airlines will be subject to the UFA, because it's national. Did the Quebec government bet that on obtaining some concessions to reinforce the federal law, that businesses would keep with the Charter of the French language? And you're the proof that that's not true. I imagine many businesses like yours would decide, well, because we do business outside of Quebec, it would be easier to withdraw from the Charter of the French language to go with the federal law. If I may clarify, when we say withdraw from the Charter of the French language, that's not quite true, given that the obligations are almost identical. So what's changing is who's regulating us. So that'll be the Federal Languages Commissioner and Heritage Canada, rather than the OQLF. But the obligations are the same under the Charter of the French language. Not exactly, because there are no administrative monetary penalties. There are significant changes between the 2. Why wouldn't banks do the same? There are banks that are subject to Bill 101, but banks also do business outside of Quebec, so then why wouldn't they use the same reasoning as you? Mr. Beaulieu, your time is up. So one sentence response. You'd have to ask the bankers. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Bélanger, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. And I'm pleased to see that you're making an effort for official languages. How does WestJet ensure they comply with the languages requirements in service to its clientele? I see that how would you compare the Quebec obligations with those outside of Quebec, if I may, quickly? I'm Franco-Ontarian by birth, and now I'm a Franco-Albertan. So Francophone communities outside of Quebec are very important for me. This new law will allow us to, and the regulation will allow us to have new obligations outside of Quebec. There are some flights, I gave some examples, that will now be subject to the regulation and the Act, and subject to the requirements to offer service in French and English. WestJet would like to go beyond those obligations. We already offer service in French on multiple flights. We didn't wait for this to come into effect because for us it's a value added. We want to serve our Francophone clientele. It's important for us. It's key. And that goes from the very top of the business, how important that is. If I may, quickly I will add this. Yes, we've talked quite a lot about Quebec because that's where the biggest Francophone presence is, so that was clearly our priority, and we want to make sure that we do serve our clientele properly. But all the efforts that we did throughout the year, be it for inline messages, pre-recorded messages, messages read out, what's written, be it the website, the app, all that's already available for the Francophone clientele outside of Quebec. The only piece of the puzzle missing will be service in flight. So does that mean, let's say I'm from the north of Ontario, from Sudbury. We have an airport in Sudbury. The competition for us is Air Canada or WestJet. For quite long flights, are the services the same? And if not, what are the challenges in order to give a comparative service, a service like in Quebec, in Sudbury? Because there is a considerable Francophone presence. Yes, exactly. Well, that will be part of the new regulation. So now we have 2 years to comply in order to offer service to Francophones from and to Sudbury. At the time being, it is not a service offered. It's mostly Toronto. But that will be part of our challenges, as we mentioned earlier. Our biggest challenge in all of this, for all businesses, but for WestJet, is hiring staff, bilingual staff, or teaching staff French. All right. Regarding your complaints, how do you respond to complaints? Do you have many complaints? Regarding French? Because right now you only offer French in Quebec, right? We do have flight attendants that speak French elsewhere than in Quebec. In Calgary and in Toronto, we do have flight attendants that are bilingual, so we are able to offer bilingual service when we have flight attendants that can. Regarding complaints, we don't have a ton. I don't have exact numbers to share with you, but we do not have many complaints on French not being offered. I'm sure it can happen that on a flight, unfortunately, there's an equipment switch over, there's a flight attendant that calls in sick, operational issues. So yes, it can happen that we are unable to offer service in French, but it is quite rare. And at WestJet, after each flight, we send our guests a poll, and this poll allows us to measure satisfaction of our clients. And so after we get the results of the poll, we analyze the points that are positive and negative, and then we take action to try and fix what we can. But complaints on service not offered in French is quite minimal. Time is up. Thank you. Now, Mr. Deschenteriot, thank you very much. I understand that you see the new regulations positively. You're going to go with the UFA, and I understand that you have 2 years, and you see it as a reasonable amount of time. Is that the case? Yes. Yes. The regulation, absolutely, yes, we see it favorably. As my colleague said, it's not an obligation. It was a process that was already underway. We want to offer bilingual service, knowing that there are Francophone communities all over Canada, and it is an advantage for us. And are you okay with 2 years? 2 years is reasonable, but it'll come fast. Like all projects, when you talk about X amount of time, you always think you have time, and it goes faster than you thought. So finding staff or putting training programs in place, we need to take action quite quickly. Hiring, training, certifying our flight attendants, that does take time. Now, regarding your preparation, you mentioned that you have a headquarter in Calgary that's not designated under UFA, and you do have a base in Montreal. So regarding the rights of your employees, the right to be supervised in French, it won't apply in Calgary, but it will apply in Montreal. What's your opinion on that? So the base is already functional. For instance, for flight attendants, we have 3 people here in Montreal that are Francophone, Anglophone as well, but who are Francophone, who supervise all flight attendants here. So that's already something available for our staff. So our staff in Quebec is supervised by someone who speaks French or English if they so wish. We do have Francophone staff that supervises our team. And with UFA, something different is that, let's say you have a flight leaving Calgary going to Ottawa. Ottawa with a high Francophone presence. Will passengers be able to serve in French as soon as they get on that flight? Please speak to your preparation in view to that eventuality. I'll let my colleague take that because he takes that flight every week. I know it very well. At the airport, there's an existing obligation under the OLA. When you get to the ticket counter, you can be served in French. The announcements need to be made in French. What's new with the regulation and with the Act is service on the aircraft. Now, the security measures are already done in French. That's pre-existing. So what'll really change, and all of our announcements are already done in French and English. This is what's changing. When you have service on the airplane, so when the drink cart comes, you have the right to be served in French. So you need flight attendants that can offer that service. So this is what that implies for us. We need to have the staff in Calgary that will operate those flights that can offer service in French. Regarding capacity, you said the federal and the provinces have a role to play in learning French and the promotion of bilingualism, but you also have specific obligations, so you need to have the workforce necessary. So please speak to your plans to train your employees internally. And you said, 2 years goes by fast. Yes, exactly. As I mentioned earlier, that was part of our phase 2 that we just started on the training plan. How we're going to ensure that we offer training, knowing that we have personnel throughout the country. So online, as among others, we haven't started. I can't specifically tell you what program we'll put in place for training. 30 seconds. So, in conclusion, I've understood that you have suggestions like the adhesion contract or the unions, but now substantially, really, it seems like you don't have any substantive suggestions to change the regulation. So do you agree with the regulation overall? Not as is. There are measures that we'd like to improve. Now, overall, it's quite similar to the Charter of the French language in Quebec that guided WestJet's efforts over the last year. So the fact that it's so similar overall, that does simplify our work. So we don't have any substantive recommendations. We have more definitional and procedural recommendations. Thank you. On behalf of the committee, I would like to thank you for being with us today. As you know, when witnesses come, it's really up to the colleagues of all parties to evaluate what the witness says and to take it into account in their work and in the report. But as the chair of this committee, on behalf of the committee, thank you for being willing to speak and quickly responding to our invitation and to offering direct responses to the members of the committee and of your professional approach today. As the chair, that's what I expect of an airline that comes to appear before the committee. And so on behalf of the committee, I thank you. And colleagues, before we leave, we do have to discuss an issue very quickly. It's administrative. The clerk distributed the budget for the committee. Has everyone seen the budget, and is it approved? Yes, we're ready to approve it. Okay, it's approved. And that's all.